literally as protesters are marching down streets in cities all across the United States, in Dallas, in Fayetteville, in Atlanta, in New York. There are pallets of bricks that have been dropped off along the protest route. In some cases, it is Antifa, and in some cases, it may be agent provocateurs. But either way, whoever is doing it for the purpose of creating chaos. And now the president is talking about bringing in the US military to help patrol streets. It's a terrible idea. But the reality is this: those who are committing acts of violence right now are not your friends. They are not helping further the cause of Black Lives Matter. They are not helping to spread the word of those protesters. In fact, they are sowing chaos in a way that will ultimately rob those protesters of their voice. I'm Ben Swann, and this is Truth in Media. Welcome to the show. I gotta tell you, I have been so frustrated over the last few days, and I want to share with you a couple of very important things. But as we go into this, I want to tell you, I'm not new to this issue of police brutality. I was in Ferguson, Missouri for the riots there. I was in Baltimore for the riots after Freddie Gray's death. I have talked about the militarization of police on US streets. I have talked about the need for criminal justice reform. I have talked about all these issues for many, many years, and now here we are in 2020, and we're watching the worst riots probably in modern history, or at least since the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. on American streets, and we are watching incredible acts of violence. And the reality is that as you watch these acts of violence take place, I'm saddened because the voice of actual legitimate protesters who are calling for legitimate changes in our society, who are calling for legitimate alterations to our criminal justice system, who are demanding actual accountability for and from police officers, who are demanding that policing change and that tactics change, are no longer being heard. These violent protesters are literally robbing those legitimate protesters of their voice. They are robbing you of your ability to speak. They are robbing you of the ability to be able to stand up against what is taking place. And so when you say we see violence in the streets and we see protesters as if it's all one thing, it is not. Keep in mind, there is absolutely, without question, an organized response, whether it's from Antifa, whether it's from agent provocateurs, regardless of who's doing it. And I'm not even sure who's doing it in every case. In some cases, it is Antifa. And in some cases, it may be agent provocateurs. But either way, whoever is doing it for the purpose of creating chaos. Because when chaos comes into the system, when chaos comes into the streets, legitimate change won't happen. It can't happen. Do you realize what's taking place here? Literally, as protesters are marching down streets in cities all across the United States, in Dallas, in Fayetteville, in Atlanta, in New York, there are pallets of bricks that have been dropped off along the protest route for protesters to grab and to take and to use to throw at police officers or throw through windows, to damage property, to help with the looting. That's what those pallets of bricks are doing, magically and amazingly popping up in all these cities. How insane is it that someone is organizing weapons of violence in order to provoke protesters to create violence and chaos every night? The people dropping off those pallets of bricks are not fighting for systemic change. They are robbing you of systemic change. They are preventing you from having an actual conversation that leads to changes that must take place. Changes like qualified immunity for police officers where they can't be sued in civil court. Justin Amash, who is a congressman from Michigan who may be running for president, has introduced a bill that would eliminate qualified immunity for police officers. That is a huge issue, and it must happen. Take away the right of police officers to be fully protected from civil lawsuits. Make them accountable personally for the things that they do. That's a good start. Another good start, ending policing for profit. Take the profit motive out of policing. Coming up in a couple of days, we'll have a full podcast talking about this issue because I believe it is the single biggest issue. You want to know why mayors across the city don't actually change their police departments? They don't actually force police departments to change the way they behave, or force police officers to change the way they behave, or end police training the way that it is. Do you know why that is? Because cities and municipalities and states financially profit off those police officers acting the way they do. That is later. But as of today, I just think it's incredibly important that we discuss this issue of the violence that is taking place. Now, there is video that you're not going to see in mainstream news of protesters who went and cleaned up. Protesters here in Atlanta just a few days ago, out in the streets, cleaning up damage that was created by a few people, a few agitators in the crowd. But those agitators right now are winning. This is the truly sad part. They are winning. The American public is not winning. The Black Lives Matter movement that's calling for actual systemic change is not winning. The only people who are winning are those who are trying to hijack this movement and create chaos so that it only serves to create damage, so that it serves to create fear, so that it serves to create a more militarized police state, because that is what is happening as well. President Trump is now calling for military to be on the streets, saying that he will actually use the Insurrection Act as a guise for being able to bring bring military into the streets in order to be able to quell the violence that local police departments and state governments are unable to quell. The president actually has the right to do it under the law, but he would be very wrong to do it. Not because, oh, we want rampages to take place and we want violence to take place. No, he'd be wrong to do it because we don't need a more militarized state in this country. We don't need military to roam the streets and people to go to military tribunals. We don't need to treat American citizens as if they are enemy combatants or on a field of battle. We don't need that. So the president would make a horrible choice in doing so and set a terrible precedent. But the president is being lured and trapped by those who are creating this violence. So what's the answer to it? Well, the first thing is this. If you are a legitimate protester, keep protesting. Do not stoop to violence. Out those who are doing it. If you're marching and you see those people with you, stop the agitators yourselves. Get away from those pallets of bricks. There has to be a counter movement within these protests that says we will not stand with those who are committing violence, because those who are committing violence are robbing us of actual change. It is happening. This is a precise and defining moment for America. And my prayer, my genuine prayer for right now, is that things will legitimately change, that we have an opportunity to see real change, fundamental change, in the way that minority groups and black men in this country are treated by law enforcement, and by the way that every person is treated by law enforcement. I hope that we see real change in the way that police departments are operating and in the way profit is taken from policing, because I believe that is obscene. But most importantly, I believe that our moment, while now, may be stolen from us by a media that will focus only on violence and a president's response, by agitators who are being paid to be there and create chaos, and by those who believe that there is no real answer because they become distracted by the sideshow. We have to fight against it.